Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, and welcome to This Week in North America. Well, I appreciate all of you continuing to stick with us and to tune in during these Thursday nights because, as you know, we bring a lot of information that a lot of you do not get through the mainstream media. And thankfully, to our viewers, to our supporters, this program has gone worldwide. You have been able to share a lot of what we put on the air with people all over this planet. And it's been a great journey to fight for freedom and liberty. Well, folks, we have a lot tonight, a heck of a lot tonight to share with you. To begin with, one program note, Sunday night at 7:30, we'll be right here on the air with a new broadcast we call A Seat at the Table. Now, what in the world is that all about? Well, that's when we put politics aside, we put all the rigmarole going on this earth aside, and we talk about the heavenly things. We talk about our Savior, Jesus Christ. We talk about scriptural principles that will encourage you and will help carry you through the storms that we're facing on this earth. We did this a few times before. The old broadcast was the fireside chat, and I've got to tell you, the response we got was tremendous. And getting feedback from people who needed to hear some positive words, not from the mouth of politicians, but from the Word of God, I've got to tell you, it was certainly something that all of us needed to see and hear. All right, so tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be speaking with Steve McMillan. Now, Steve is from North Carolina. He's a grassroots political leader who's going to be weighing in on a lot of issues, and we'll be bringing up those issues very soon. Also, guess who's back? Ray McGinnis, back by popular demand. We've had Ray on a few times, and I've got to tell you, he's well-loved in Canada and now here in the United States. And we'll be talking to him about a host of issues related to the WEF, the World Economic Forum, the Liberal government in Canada, and much more of what's going on in Canada. And then Alan Nicholson, he'll give us an update on the Hague inquiry, which has truly captured the attention of people around the world. That's an effort that him and a number of other people have been involved in order to bring before the Hague the alleged criminal acts of the leaders, at least some of them, and others in Canada. Okay, so we're going to get right to Steve McMillan. Steve, I want to certainly thank you for joining us tonight.
What a great pleasure it is, Steve.
Steve, before I start, can you just give us a little bit about your background? There are people all over the world watching, so can you tell us who you are and where you're from?
Certainly. Well, physically, I'm from Wilmington, North Carolina, palm trees close to the Gulf Stream here, not Wilmington, Delaware, where there are all sorts of classified documents spilling around and so on. So not that place, on the East Coast of the United States. And I must say, Steve, you have not stayed in your zip code in New Jersey, because I am so thrilled to look on the side here and see all these folks, perhaps more from Canada than from the U.S., though a great showing from the U.S. as well. And that is so wonderful. And I'll tell you, before we get into any topic, watching your show before, one of the things that moved me so much was the patriotic fervor that was coming from our friends above the border in Canada. And it helped me realize, wait a minute, I'm not crazy. There are actually infringements on our freedoms. And it's sort of hard to say, is this sort of, it's not a minority vote in terms of the number of voice, in terms of the number of people, but rather the media would have you believe yourself to be insane for questioning the government and questioning all these wacky new things. So thank you, Canada, all you brave souls that have come on and joined this North American movement of which we are all part, to support the voice of freedom. So and just a quick bio, I am very honored to be part of the local GOP operation here in New Hanover County, which is in Wilmington. And this is an absolute, footprint of what should happen everywhere in thousands of little communities all across the United States and Canada, where you get into the grassroots of these things. So you can ignore, and you must ignore, the media and go about convincing your neighbors and other people of the truth, demonstrate the truth, and it works. And then on a larger scale, I worked in President Trump's first campaign in 2016 and traveled around with Laura Trump in particular on the Women for Trump bus, and that had a very enriching experience working with Trump's reelection campaign, and therefore was part of that operation all through his administration up until 2020. So but I would rather relate to the audience as them. I am one of the local neighbors that goes up to the local, political office and passes out flyers, and in my case, does video. That's what I do, and participates as a layperson in protecting the freedoms that are so fragile.
Steve, to that point, before we go on to some of these topics, Grassroots America, and now Grassroots Canada, and now Grassroots Canada and America. It works, doesn't it? To be that local guy passing out the flyers, before you know it, you're in the White House.
Well, let me give you evidence of that. So we won across the board in New Hanover County, the school board, the county commission, every local office that we had. And more interesting, it was by a razor thin margin. So it was the efforts that we put in. By the way, we lost everything the elections before, and all the crazy liberal ideas just flooded in, and there seemed to be nothing we could do. They just overtook the city, CRT, etc. And so we won all those seats now because of a local effort. It has nothing to do with what's coming out of the news media, nothing to do with what's coming out of Washington. It has everything to do with what people like the Canadians that are watching this show, yourself and me, do on a grassroots level. If we try to fight them on the media level, we will lose every time, as we have.
Steve, to your point, I'm going to show you something. All right. To your point about unity and coming together, what do you think of this background, this backdrop here? Look at that. That was given to us here at Campaign for America by Alan and Carol Nicholson, who are Canadians. And I've got to tell you, this unity between both countries is something like we've never seen before. So thank you, Steve, for joining us. Well, Steve, tonight, unfortunately, we have to talk about a bill that was presented to the United States Congress. Thank God, and I really mean it, thank the Lord, it came before the new Congress that is now dominated by Republicans. It's called the Born Alive Act. And ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who do not know that, the Republicans advanced a bill that would require doctors who performed abortions and the baby survived. It required doctors not to, but made it clear that doctors did not have to save that baby's life. So they would see that child survive an abortion and linger and bleed to death or gasp for air on an operating room table, and they would leave it there. I'll tell you, Steve, in all my life in this country, I never believed I would ever see something like that. Every Democrat but one voted in favor of that bill. Voted against the bill that would save these children on the operating table. And every Republican voted for it. And we did prevail, did we not, Steve?
Well, we did. And sadly, they had to. And that's because their whole argument is that 10 seconds before a child might be born, it's an inanimate clump of cells. And they cannot possibly say that it was suddenly, resurrected as it came out of the birth canal and becomes a real person. They have to stick to those guns, and I'll guarantee you a lot of them were swallowing hard. I mean, that's really calling their bluff, and it's absolutely true. I mean, of course you can't let a child die in that situation, and it's just barbarous for any doctor to think he's, well, I've already been paid, better get the job done. That's disgusting and awful. And so I'm so grateful. But again, that put the spotlight back on them as no other, bill or provision has. They have to face the fact that they voted, yep, let the child die on the table. All of them had to do it. Otherwise, their whole argument with abortion largely is gone.
And for those of our American audience, I urge you, please call your congressional representative, especially if they're Democrat. I have a Democrat congressional representative, and they're going to hear from me tomorrow. Make it very, very clear in a civil way, all right, in an intelligent way. Make it very clear that they not only will never get your support, but you're going to do everything you can to defeat them. Because, Steve, if you and I have learned anything in politics, a lot of these politicians care little about us and only about their political survival. They need to know this is the most horrendous act on the part of congressional representatives that I've seen in my lifetime.
Well, I heard from our local rep and a guy that I like, and I think most people in the United States, Canada, I'm not sure how you feel about your local politicians, but the congressman from our area is a terrific guy. He communicates a lot with his constituents, puts out lots of information, and he goes, he says, and I believe him, to the Congress with what he believes are the wishes and will of the people. But as a congressman, they have no say by the time it gets up to McConnell or who else, what becomes policy. So they're really hamstringed. And I know we're going to get into this in the next conversation, but I'm extraordinarily proud of all the people on the GOP side that made tons of noise recently to try to snap that gridlock of, those other than the elite power, including the Speaker of the House, no longer hold complete sway over the American people.
Well, let's talk about that. That's one of our topics, and we'll talk about it now. As you say, in the old days, it was the Speaker of the House or the chair committee people that would actually rule. I mean, just rule. And this is the way it's going to be. But now, because of the efforts of the America First people, the Freedom Caucus, I mean, people who were elected by the people, of the people, and for the people, they certainly stood the course. And now, Steve, if you could share with our audience what that means to now the future of this country.
Well, one thing is that the left would depict it as they said it was a terrible embarrassment to America to see such shenanigans on the floor. And I show it as complete patriotism and courage, the same as in the founding of our, dumping tea into the harbor and so on, terrible quote unquote misbehavior. And I couldn't have been more excited. Now, I don't know. I'm going to read just a couple of the headlines here. And I don't know if this happens in every Congress and we just don't hear about it because no one raises Cain like to happen to this. But the first thing to happen is rescinding the funding for the IRS, the $87,000. The left in this case, by the way, said, we're going to get this huge deficit because IRS is not chasing neighbors around the neighborhood to get some extra cash. And it's going to be over $100 billion in 10 years. And I would challenge that to say, if you quit wasting 10% of the money you do, American government, you'd easily avoid such a deficit. Establishing a committee on competition with China, establishing a subcommittee on weaponization of the federal government. We've seen that through the last 4 years, where the FBI will come after private citizens or go after a political party that they don't particularly like. Let's see, condemning attacks on churches, big one, anti-abortion groups and facilities and groups. It's perfectly okay in this country, Canada, I don't know about there, but you can firebomb or do whatever you want to an anti-abortion protest, et cetera, or a church of worship, and nothing really will come of it. But dare you raise your voice to things that are unconstitutional, they will get you. We just talked about Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. And this is so stupid, prohibiting oil sales from Strategic Petroleum Reserve to China. In this case, they're called SPR. It's some company controlled by China. In the meantime, we're around the world begging for oil. Meanwhile, we got, wonderful reserves here. So again, this may be typical of what is raised in each new Congress, but now we're taking it seriously because the gavel's dropping on a lot of it. IRS agents are gone. Hopefully the rest of these things will do. And that's because our speaker has been held to account. Now, I'm going to support him and so on. But boy, they kicked him in the shins. I don't know how many votes until, as Matt Gaetz said, why'd you vote for him? Well, I didn't have anything else. He said he'd do everything we promised. I ran out of things to argue about. So what a terrific exercise of voices for the people. And the people included, starts here in America, Canada, Mexico, anywhere around the world where people are fighting to get their voice heard and their freedoms, girded.
I'm glad it turned out well. What I was concerned about, and I think a lot of Americans were, Steve, it almost became a clown show. I mean, it almost came that way. And when Mike Rogers, and by the way, no relation, although my brother's name was Mike, when he lost his temper, we're all human, these things happen, and he went after Matt Gaetz publicly, that was very, very concerning. I remember Mike Pence, when his life was threatened and they put a hangman's noose out on the Capitol Hill there. I remember him saying, not here, not in America. This cannot be happening. And I kind of said the same thing. You want to protest in the halls of Congress. We seem to have, across the political spectrum in America, a lack of dignity, a lack of respect for each other. I miss the Ronald Reagan days. I do. I really miss those days. But saying that, as you framed it, it was like a 15-round boxing match that we got to see. And I think you brought it into great perspective because this is what goes on behind the scenes.
Well, look, in England, they're hooting and hollering and screaming. And I mean, it's just a typical day in Parliament.
But in Canada, and I'm not going to talk about the parliament. The people there are so peaceful. They had that freedom convoy against the parliament. The people were so peaceful, so respectable, and it was the government under Trudeau that was unleashed on the people in a very brutal way. But saying to your point, I'm glad you brought that perspective in. It kind of puts things in, well, it was those things. And I was elected to office, and I tell you, I recall some heated discussions I had with my colleagues behind the scenes. But when you're before the public, you're having a cup of coffee, so you know what? It all worked out well, Steve.
It certainly does. But the only thing I'd say more gruesome than some of the spectacles we saw that you described is the feigned look of concern for the people that the government serves, and pretend that they're sincere, and behind the back are stabbing them. I'd rather see a little emotion and then some action after that than the former thing that I described.
Yeah, I ditto that. Well done. So now let's talk about this. So we have a place called Mar-a-Lago, surrounded by FBI agents, SWAT teams, and helicopters and news sources executing search warrants on the former president, Donald Trump, made this into a major political firestorm across the country. Well, Trump had classified documents, they shouldn't be there, etc. And here we are today, not only with the Department of Justice now have to looking into Biden having classified documents in an old office, but today they found classified documents in his house and in his garage next to his Corvette. And right before we came on the air, they find out that Hunter Biden did have access to the garage next to the Corvette, which was what? The classified documents. Now, Steve, my question to you is this. Tonight, I understand that Attorney General Garland is going to assign a prosecutor, all right, special counsel, right? Yep. So where do we go from here? Really, I mean, the people of America are fed up with this. Biden should be removed from office, in my view.
Okay, well, speaking of theatrics and the disrespectful acts, that happened with Trump. So truly, with Biden, leaving a trail of classified documents around, I don't believe he did it with any intention. I think it's sloppy work. But I would not, had Trump not gone after it, consider that any big deal at all. I mean, it shouldn't happen, but it happens, I think, with a lot of people that leave office. They're buried in it every day for 4 years. It's bound to happen. The issue, of course, is the terrible contrast between the political hit job on Trump. He had been in conversation with the archives. They knew it was there. He wasn't sitting on it. And they suddenly decided to raise Cain and make a political statement about it. Everyone knew where the documents were. And I'll tell you what, they were a hell of a lot more safeguarded in Mar-a-Lago in a locked area than, sitting next to the Corvette or other places they were. So again, just to summarize, I don't think it's that big a deal in terms of a former vice president having some of that. Is sloppy. It should be addressed. But the big deal is this proves it. And watch the way this goes. Garland's not going to find any great fault with him. They're going to have to undo the political mess that they tried to surround and assassinate President Trump's character even further. That's what this shows, I think.
Well, I think that search warrants should be executed on the Biden residency, the Obama residency. He was president at the time. So what's good for Trump should be good for them. Yeah. And you're right. This exposes the hypocrisy and the double standard that this government has brought upon its people. And I'd like also, as we're speaking, as the Canadian people watch things unfold here, and especially the fact that we got our Congress back, let this be an encouragement to you. You can do this. You work within the framework of the law. Steve, we said that all along. Work within the framework of the law. You have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms on your side. That's not on the side of the lawbreakers, your parliament and your prime minister. And we have the Constitution of the United States on our side. And Joe Biden and the Democrats in our Congress are certainly, in my view, committing criminal acts against the Constitution. So we in America used our Constitution, as Steve did with his group, and you can do the same. And isn't that true, Steve, that we have the law on our side and we have prayer on our side? We have everything on our side. All we have to do is make sure we're not distracted by the garbage, by what you and I talked about earlier, the onslaught of fake news, what the media sends out, but stay focused.
Yeah, absolutely. I just posted on Facebook earlier that documents were found by Biden, and I'm not mad. I just want to make sure they raid all of his properties to further deface the office of the president. It's absurd.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it is absurd. All right. So one other, a couple other things I want to talk to you about, but perhaps one other, and we've run out of time. We're going to have you back. All right. The select committees. A lot of Americans, a lot of people around the world are asking the question. One of these select committees is going to go into action, and of course, we're going to ask the question again. Through all of this, where's Hunter?
Yeah, no kidding. Well, of course, they've already talked about, getting a committee together to investigate what's happening around the world with the whole Biden debacle. And, it has all except for who's the other gentleman, the AG that's been going after, maybe it's not the AG, but going after the mistreatment of Trump and the Russian, I forget his name.
What was Mueller was the special counsel.
No, this is on behalf of freedom. I forget his name, with the goatee. What is his name? But he's been going after those folks that about the Russian debacle against Trump. Anyway.
Oh, he's in Congress, isn't he?
No, he's a prosecutor or especially appointed.
I know who you're talking about,
but nevertheless, he's the only one that has delivered something. Now, Durham, thank you. He's the only one, and he sort of disappeared. I thought, there goes another one. Barr disappeared. Everyone that, saber rattling, saying they're going to take care of this. Nothing happened. Well, Durham brought some forth. So now you're right. Now, with all the things that went on in Congress, these committees, are they going to pursue this? And is something going to come of it? Once again, I cannot stand the glorious sounding orations from the pulpit from politicians, and then nothing happens. So we must keep our eye on that. We must encourage our local representatives to continue the fight on the Hill. And again, let's be civilized, I suppose, but speak up and don't vote or support things that aren't first in line with the Constitution, because all of us freedom lovers can go there. If you're doing that, you're on the right track. But secondly, the wishes of your constituents in particular. Speak up. We need to speak up from a grassroots level. That must be passed uphill, and it must end up as national policy.
Well, you're right. Speaking up at school board meetings, very, very important. We have a situation in New Jersey where the governor decides, well, he's going to set up his own committee to set up curriculum that will be based on this, Steve. It'll be based on sharing with our children what information and disinformation is. In other words, our school districts here in New Jersey will be required to share with people, at least in my view, that if you bring up a biblical principle, if people on this committee say, well, that's disinformation, it's fake news, well, that's what children are going to be taught. But there's a big, big pushback right now going on. Remember Biden's his Center of Information? Remember that was that he was setting up,
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. He got that idea, I believe, from Justin Trudeau, because the Canadians up there are fighting, very gallantly against it. I think the Canadian people are going to win on that one. But so they had this information agency that Biden put together. Would it last 48 hours? I think that was it. Yeah.
It passed a stink test even on the left. Somehow they say we can't pull that off. And much again due to thank you from our friends up north, the Canadians. They've been demonstrating to us how to hold the line.
Yes.
And I'm proud of them, and I'm very glad that I'm not mad, and that my perception of things being taken away with us is not just some lunacy within me. I see other people going through the same thing, and it heartens me.
Yeah, it sure is. Steve, I do want to talk to you about, but we're going to move on. I'm going to have you back in the future about the Ukraine-Russian war. We're going to have to spend a little time on that because that's something that everybody's concerned about. I like getting different perspectives. But Steve, it's been excellent. We will have you back. Do you want to say anything to our Canadian friends before you leave us?
Other than thank you so much for erasing the border between America and the North and recognizing all of us as being a homogenous pool of freedom lovers. And we need your help, and I pray that we can help you too. But if we all stand in solidarity together, then we will get something done. This is just a terrific evidence of, the camaraderie among freedom-loving people. And I got to tip my hat to you. You're leveraging God or the Holy Spirit or however you pulled it off. Look at this thing grow. This is unbelievable. Again, you climbed way out of your zip code in New Jersey, and I'm very honored to be asked on to take part in it. And I will certainly be following your efforts and supporting you as I can.
Steve, thank you. And I can tell you, the guy up there, he went way out of his zip code, so it wasn't me. Thanks, Steve, and I'll see you and talk to you again. Thanks so much. Thank you. Well, there you go, folks. Steve McMillan, what an American patriot, what an individual who started off at grassroots. I did work with him on a lot of different things in this country that were going on in the past. And I got to tell you, what a great thing. And let this be an encouragement to people, not only in the United States, but in Canada, who's really fighting the fight gallantly. And in some of the nations that many of the people have been in touch with us. Now, we're going to switch over to Ray McGinnis. Ray, I'm going to welcome you aboard, and thanks for joining us again.
Great to be with you, Lieutenant Rogers. It's good to be speaking with you.
What do you think of that guy, Steve McMillan, huh?
Very, very interesting to hear what he's saying, and exactly right about, you can't just pick on one president of a political party regarding classified documents and treat the other one as if it's no big deal. You have to treat them both with equal seriousness or lack of seriousness, the case may be.
Well, the Canadian people, like yourself, truly opened the eyes of people here in the United States about the World Economic Forum. I could tell you that over the years, people in America, and I've said this over and over again, weren't too concerned about the World Economic Forum. We weren't concerned about Canada. We got a great country. Our attitude was, on the northern border, nothing to worry about, wonderful people, and we just focused totally on the southern border. And then we find out that the people in Canada are under the gun, if you will, from the Trudeau government, and there's attempts to take their freedoms and liberties away. And so my hat's off to you, Ray, and the Canadian people for opening up the eyes of a lot of people here in America. But I'm going to ask you a few questions, all right? And the first question is, what's the evidence? What's the evidence that the Liberal government in Ottawa has involvement in the World Economic Forum? We hear a lot about this, but is there any evidence that they are involved with the WEF?
Yeah, that was something that I wanted to, I've had to have a steep learning curve on the World Economic Forum. I just thought of it as some, transnational, international organization where people get together and sit in long meetings with boring conversations and don't accomplish much. Well, it's easy to find online that, back in, Klaus Schwab, who's the head of the World Economic Forum, bragged at a meeting in 2017 that nearly half of the Canadian cabinet, which is about, 40 people, were graduates of the Young Leaders Program of the World Economic Forum. And Chrystia Freeland, who's the current deputy prime minister and the finance minister in cabinet, is on the board of trustees. And in that capacity, she's a guardian of the World Economic Forum's mission and values. And so has at least they're giving her marching orders to keep the WEF point of view, before the Canadian government. And then I found out that, it shifts, of course. They have the young global leaders going, every year they have their Davos meeting upcoming. I think Chrystia Freeland's going to be there. Mary Ng, who's the international trade minister, is going to be there. I think currently there's about, 14 or 15 of the cabinet ministers who are there. Now, you don't have to have half or all the people in cabinet. If you've got, a third to a half of the people in cabinet that all have this common experience, that are all kind of, off the same page and the same playbook, they can have quite a forceful influence on what cabinet decides. Just one, I won't mention all the names of the people who are in cabinet right now, but Marie-Claude Bibeau is the Minister of Agriculture. And it just happens that in Canada, the government's been talking about maybe requiring Canadian farmers to reduce their nitrogen in their farms by 30%. They don't seem to realize that farmers have apps to help them determine exactly what amount of nitrogen they need to put in the soil. They don't want to spend any more money than they absolutely have to. We know what's been happening with the farmers in the Netherlands and all of their protests. And so I think the government may be backing off a little bit, but just the same, that seems to be an idea coming out of the WEF playbook. So So there definitely is solid evidence that there's quite a lot of people who end up in cabinet that happen to have a little bit of experience with the WEF point of view. So that should be of concern to Canadians.
Ray,
As well as Jagmeet Singh, the New Democratic Party leader who's in the coalition with the minority government with the Liberals, and also the former provincial premier of the province of Quebec, who is Jean Charest, was the current leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre's principal opponent. So what would have happened if Charest had ended up as the leader of the Conservative Party? You would have Charest, Trudeau, and Jagmeet Singh, all former young global leaders of the WEF.
Ray, I had a couple of our colleagues do a deep dive into the WEF with one question I wanted answered. Are they succeeding? And the answer is no. They're making a lot of noise. They are now making a major effort to disrupt a lot of countries. But with the pushback that we're seeing across the globe, we're yet to see anything very successful that they've achieved. For example, in America, and I'm sure in Canada, the climate change thing, the wind, eating different types of foods, etc. I mean, we haven't seen that yet. So is it possible that by getting information out the way you are and others across the world, that they now know they have a tough job ahead of them?
I think that it's like a wake-up call. Whenever you've got international interests like this, and they have a long history with other interlocking people with the Bilderberg Group and I don't know, the Trilateral Commission, people that think about like that they feel that they have the best ideas, and whenever whether they're successful or not, when you have a group of people that decide that they've appointed themselves to be the people that know better than you, ordinary citizens, we all need to pay attention to that, because if we don't, then sometimes the people that think they know better than us will find themselves in the driver's seat, and we don't want that.
Well, to the point of what we talked about earlier, of course, the Biden administration and the Democrats thought they knew better than us, and they didn't. They lost a lot of offices across the country, and some of them are going to go to jail. I think Fauci is in trouble. I believe others are in serious trouble because, to your point, Roy, as long as we get information out, and a person like you getting the truth out, you're speaking to power. You, Roy McGinnis, are speaking to power in your country, and you're letting people know, look, you know what? Don't take advantage of the Canadian people. And here in America, don't take advantage of the American people. We're smarter than you'd think. It's a very good point you bring up. I want to move on to something here. In America, as well as in Canada, and folks, this is why we're really married together. The Democrats here have tried to demonize those who are not vaccinated. They're the bad people. They're spreading the disease. They've got to be isolated. Those who are not vaccinated, they've got to be put in a corner and isolated. But what goes through my mind and the mind of others is, do you think, at least in Canada, their position on unvaccinated people is creating a wedge, that they want to actually create a wedge, that they want to divide the population? And you kind of think this may be a political gamble on their part, because in America, it's not working. The Dems are being slaughtered over this now because facts are coming out about how this started, who was involved in spreading it, and not the disease, but the propaganda. And I assume that is going to be very, very quickly a problem for the Canadian Parliament liberals up there, who have done the same thing the Democrats have done here.
Yeah, I think that, the Liberal government, Liberal Party of Canada has abandoned all of the principles of classical liberalism, tolerance, individual autonomy, freedom of speech, and so on. And the Prime Minister, just in the spring, March, April, May of 2021, was assuring us that as Canadians that, we're going to have this new vaccine, but it's not going to be mandatory. It's up to you. You talk to your doctor, you decide what you think is best. Talking about the truck drivers being the heroes of the pandemic, regardless of their vaccination status. And suddenly, Prime the prime minister found himself in an election last, August into September of 2021, and late August he's like behind 7.58% in the polls behind the Conservatives. And so what he did was he decided all of a sudden to start talking tough, and he started wagging his finger in front of the press and saying, these unvaccinated people are trying to harm our children. They are trying to harm your own endanger your public health. They're tinfoil hats, they're conspiracy theorists, and so on. And he pounded away at that, and the Liberals ended up like about 1.5% behind the Conservatives in the final vote tally. But because of the way that we group people's votes, just like you do in your congressional districts, the Liberals got a bit more than the Conservatives, and they've got this minority government. And so they kept pounding away at this with the most illiberal results. You have situations where you've got, with this kind of rhetoric, you end up with stories in the news where a hiker on a trail in Nova Scotia is fined by the police for walking by themselves outdoors without a mask. You have a young teenage hockey player in Calgary who is going around on an outdoor rink by himself with a puck, and police are threatening to taser the boy unless he leaves the hockey rink, the outdoor hockey rink. You've got grocery stores in New Brunswick being encouraged to not allow unvaccinated people to come in and shop for groceries, and I could go on. But this kind of environment and was what resulted in Trudeau's trash talking. And so it's in spite of the fact that early in August of 2021, your own CDC, Rochelle Walensky, I believe, had already admitted that the vaccine did not prevent infection and did not prevent transmission. And so people were wondering, why would I need to get a vaccine that's not going to prevent me from spreading it or getting sick? So it didn't make sense to a lot of people, but that's our prime minister.
Well, here's what I've sent this message here on the air and elsewhere to the Canadian Parliament members who watch, some of them, or their operatives. I know they're watching this broadcast. They need to know, you better keep an eye on what's happening here. You see what happened to the Democrats in this country? Well, the Congress is now in our hands. The Senate will, and so will the White House. Some people are going to go to jail. And when that happens, Ray, I've seen this over and over again in my experience as a law enforcement officer. People start singing. And watch what happens, folks, when finally the Congress gets involved in investigating Joe Biden, investigating Fauci. People on the lower level, they're not going to go to prison for these people. They're going to start singing. So again, word to the wise of those of you who are in leadership positions in politics in Canada. You're going down. You're going to go down, and it's not going to be through protests or anything like that. The people in Canada and the United States and elsewhere have always advocated work within the framework of the law. They have. You haven't, like our government leaders haven't. And soon, very soon, many of you are going to be paying a heavy, heavy political price for your unethical and alleged illegal actions against the people. I thank God for people like Ray and other Canadians around your country who are standing up. Hey, Ray, I want to talk a little bit about your media out there. The Canadian Broadcasting Network. I call it the Communist Broadcasting Network. And I did hear, okay, I won't get into too many specifics. Let's say this, I did hear from somebody not very happy with my description of the Canadian Broadcasting Network. But that's too bad, because that's my opinion. And by the way, those of you on the Canadian Broadcasting Network, reporters, whoever watched this program, we have a free country here in America. We can say whatever we want so long as we're not threatening people's lives, etc. So I have every right and will not be censored to define you the way I think you are. So you're like CNN out here. You're like MSNBC. Now, the only difference is that MSNBC and CNN, they are on the air as a result of sponsors, corporate sponsors, which, by the way, they're losing thousands and thousands, millions now of dollars because they're being deserted. You are ruled by your government, all right? You in Canada, and please, Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, financially, your networks have to depend on the government, so they have to basically do what they're told by the government. Am I wrong? And if I am, please tell me, Ray.
Okay. So, I mean, I was raised, watching Hockey Night in Canada with Foster Hewitt. And I mean, the CBC was seen by many Canadians for many years, not all, but for many decades back, decades ago. It's kind of a gold standard of like, thank goodness we have, fair fairness in reporting, accuracy in reporting, and we can basically trust, we'd have a range of discussions on points of view, on panel discussions, and so on. I even at times, numbers of decades ago, back in the previous century, would even give money to the Friends of the CBC to help shore up, good broadcasting in Canada, but no more. And we've had a real sea change. I mean, there are people who are Trish Wood, Tara Henley, a number of people who've been former employees of the CBC as reporters who've come out in the last numbers of years and even decades talking about the shift going on in the CBC and the kind of groupthink. And in 2019, 18, the government, the Liberal government, in the majority position, gave they gave $600 million to 1,500 different media outlets across the country, partly because they're losing sponsors, whether they're public or private. And then again in the 2021 election, the government again gave $61 million. And it seems that there's been more and more this kind of groupthink that's happening in the editorial rooms and of all manner, whether it's the CBC or the Toronto Star, or Global TV or the CTV. They're all kind of in this kind of groupthink where there's less and less room for a diversity of opinion. And I know Marianne Kloak, I think is her name, who formally she left the CBC at the beginning of 2021, maybe, and she talked about how she would want to be interviewing people who had vaccine injuries, and there'd be no interest at all on the part of the higher up brass that they would have any kind of a variety of opinions about the safety of the vaccines or any number of the wisdom of the lockdowns or whatever. And so it seems that there's just a narrative, a message that's more and more. And so I may not call them the Communist Broadcasting Corporation, but I call them the COVID Broadcasting Corporation.
So, Ray, I've asked CBC people, producers, directors, reporters, to come on the air here. And I told them if they don't want to be on this broadcast, I'll be more than glad to sit across the table from them. And I've got to tell you, I get the impression they're scared to death. They actually shake in their knees thinking that they would be challenged because it would hurt the financial aspects of their broadcasting. And I clearly believe that that's the case there. So I would say that down the road, look, we're the news now, folks. We here live streaming. We are the news. We're the future. And support programs and support you got the Shadow Davis show up there. I believe that's his name. I remember.
I think so.
Great broadcaster. That guy. I mean, the guy is doing a tremendous job in trying to do what other broadcasters are doing in Canada. And my wife and I had a discussion today, right? We said, millions and millions of dollars that people give politicians through these elections, whether it be in America or whether it be in Canada or elsewhere. What do we get from them, folks? Nothing. I mean, thank God this time around in America, we're getting what we certainly elected to office. But, I'm thinking, like my wife said, these politicians literally get millions of dollars in donations. And then when you have programs that come up that really represent the people, it's tough. It's very tough getting people to contribute. But in your country, all right. And Shadow Davis comes to mind. I've had him on this broadcast. He doesn't even know I was going to mention this, but you know what? You got one of a few broadcasts up there. Look them over, check them out, and please support them through prayer. Support them any way you could, because Ray, I mean this, that we're going to be the first line. We used to be the last line of defense against this attack on freedom and liberty. Now we're the first line of defense, and what we need to do is to bring prayerful, financial, whatever type of support to these programs, especially the ones you have in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think like I've had people that I would try and show them, like I went to the Public Order Emergency Commission in Ottawa and was there for 4 days sitting in and listening, and then I would send people that I know. I would say you need to listen to what the National Security Advisor of the Prime Minister Jody Thomas was saying. Here's a clip, because you don't want to listen to 5 hours of her testimony. Here's a clip for 4 minutes, and the person would reject my sending them that YouTube clip because the person who posted it online was a conservative source that they didn't like. I mean, it's almost as if I decided to send you a clip of the final scene in The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy's saying, "Oh, Annie M, there's no place like home." And like, you might not believe that that's actually what happened in The Wizard of Oz because I'm a conservative source. So it's like there's this complete tuning out on the part of so many people in terms of what really is happening on the ground. One thing that's been happening, is that the meshing of the government with the media. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino and his staff, they were talking with the Prime Minister's office staff on the 23rd of January, just as the truck started rolling from the West Coast, the Pacific Coast. And they'd already decided that they had some talking points. This is going to be like January 6th North and white supremacists and violent, aggressive people and so on, and insurrectionists trying to topple the government. And they were grousing, as the Emergencies Act was invoked. They were grousing in their internal emails about how there were some reporters that were asking tough questions, not about how bad the truckers were and the protesters, but they were asking some tough questions about why did you have to invoke the Emergencies Act? And so the public safety minister and his staff made sure from the press conferences going forward, that they would only handpick certain reporters that they knew would ask the kind of questions that they want to answer. And that's not what you're supposed to do in a press conference.
Maybe you could help the American audience here understand a few things regarding what led up to the Emergencies Act. To begin with, can you touch upon Justin Trudeau and Christina Freeland's testimony and some of the cabinet members regarding the Public Order Emergency Commission? And could you tell us about the case that to invoke the Emergency Act on Valentine's Day in 2022?
Yeah. So the Emergencies Act, so the protest happened because back in November 2021, the Prime Minister decided that all of a sudden the heroes of the pandemic who've been taking product to hospitals and grocery stores and hardware stores and gas stations suddenly need to be required to be vaccinated to cross the border. Even though there's hardly a border point aside from the US-Mexico border that required truckers to drive, anywhere in Southeast Asia, Africa, the Middle East, Europe, South America. Any truckers could cross the border because those governments said, these are essential service workers. We want to have strong supply chains, strong economies, and we don't care whether they're vaccinated or not because they're driving in a truck by themselves. But our Prime Minister decided, no, we're going to require them to do this. And under testimony, the Deputy Minister, Chrystia Freeland, conceded that it wasn't about getting the truckers, yes, they got the truckers to be required to have the vaccine, but this was a political move to signal to all of the unvaccinated Canadians, hey, we've got the truckers now being required to be vaccinated, so you better step up to the plate too, so we can have 100%. So this was also like a wedge issue to try and pressure and intimidate unvaccinated Canadians to get, motivate them to get vaccinated. And so the truck drivers and all the trucking industry people were saying, what gives? Why is this happening? And in the Health Committee, Canadian Parliament in March of 2022, both the Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, and Health Minister Duclos couldn't provide any data at all to show there was any reason, any scientific reason or health reason for truck drivers to be required to have the vaccination. So there was this big steamroll of people wanting to say, we're done with this. We're going to go to Ottawa. And then the media started saying, well, this is Vladimir Putin has motivated these truck drivers to drive to Ottawa, or they're all going there because they want to burn apartment buildings of good Ottawa residents, or they're trying to bomb schools, or it's just like everything but the kitchen sink was thrown at them. And finally, and also through the testimony before the commission, it was clear that the city of Ottawa, from about the 8th or 9th of February, have been able to sit down with the chief of staff and other people, sitting down with the lead protesters, and they had an agreement. And they were that by February, on Valentine's Day at noon, they had 102 vehicles that had been moved out of the city. They were gone, bye, and they were on schedule to get 75% of all of the vehicles out of the city of Ottawa, and they would have been gone. So all this discussion about we need tow trucks. Well, 75% of the vehicles would have been gone by the end of Wednesday the 16th. So all of this rhetoric about how these people are unreasonable was also complete nonsense. As well, the Prime Minister, the police wanted to de-escalate the situation, as did the protest leaders. And the Prime Minister, in his testimony, said, we heard about a so-called plan. And then up on the screen, because we got to see documents sitting there in the hearing room, we got to see the beginnings of a 73-page, very detailed plan signed off by the RCMP, on Ottawa Police Service, and the Ontario Provincial Police. And so here's a very detailed plan. And the Prime Minister said, well, I never saw that plan, and I don't have confidence in the plan, even though he'd never seen it.
Remarkable. Remarkable.
Yeah.
Well, Ray, I'm gonna wrap it up. I got Alan Nicholson coming on, but saying that, I know there's a lot more to discuss with you. So would you be able to come back sometime?
Absolutely.
All right. This has been
a pleasure.
Very enlightening, at least for the people here in America. And God bless you, Ray. Ray, thanks so much. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Lieutenant Roger. Take care.
God bless you. Bye-bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, another patriot up there in Canada, North American patriots, right, standing together. Well, let's go to this other patriot here. Here is Alan Nicholson. Hello, Alan.
Look at that. I got to do my hair.
You're right side up. Usually you're upside down. Hey, Alan, thanks again for this backdrop. We're getting a lot of great responses. Thank you and your wife, Carol.
It's mostly my wife. I just pay the bills. She
Well,
takes the decision.
all right, Alan, a lot of people have been contacting me regarding Project Maple Leaf and the Hague Inquiry. With regard to Project Maple Leaf, we're on target. We're now refining the documents that we're going to hand over to our United States Congress, and we're going to give you a copy so that you could include in your complaint an inquiry at the Hague. Can you give us an update? Because people are asking about that.
Yes. So, as I said before Christmas, by the way, Happy New Year to everyone. 2023 is going to be amazing. Just before Christmas, the French version of the Hague documents were completed. Over the holiday, they were translated into English. Now they're just double checking their work. And then it's going to be sent out to all concerned, including yourself.
Alan, with regard to that Hague inquiry, are there political names in there? Are there people who we're familiar with who are going to be charged with something there?
Of course there is.
Well, all right. So my next question is this. Of course, I'm not going to ask you to give up any names. That's confidential. But what if your citizens do have information, credible information, and names of people who they have been, or let's put it this way, who need to be questioned maybe by the Hague? Is it possible for them to get that information to you?
Yes, I think you have my email.
Yeah, let me see. Is this it right there?
Yes, that's perfect. So
okay.
Everybody who's watching, we do not discriminate against bad people. So we want to make sure we gather them all up properly. So if you have any names, we would need the person's name, their title, where they're located as per work or what they do. And if you could send me that information via that email that's up on the screen, to make sure that we do not forget anyone, because like I said, we don't want to discriminate. We want to make sure everybody's included and we don't forget no one. So if there's anybody that you think should be included, please send that name via email to us. Your name will not be included in The Hague, by the way. So if you do send me an email with a report on who you think should be added into this, because we don't want to discriminate, your name will not show up anywhere. It's all private. It's confidential.
Alan, I understand the Hague's already agreed to take on this.
Yes.
They've already agreed to do that. That's got to run a chill up and down the spine of some of the leaders in Canada. I do have a question for you, and if you want to answer it, you don't have to. And you'll get my reaction probably more from my face than from saying anything. Are there any names of U.S. Politicians?
Yes.
Okay. There's my response. So you've done extensive work. Good for you. Good for
Yes.
you and your team. Good for
There's
you.
even people who are in Europe who are on the list, because
Alan, you're shaking everybody up across the globe, for goodness sakes.
we don't discriminate. Like I
You're
said,
shaking up these politicians. You see, folks, it goes to my point. You know, on this broadcast, we've said all along, the bad guys always get caught. It takes
Yes.
maybe a year and a half. But there's good guys like Alan, like his wife Carol, like David Doolin up there, who've been working closely with the country he loves, and Ray and others. There's wonderful people in Canada. There's wonderful people here in the United States. And those of you in other countries in Europe who've been in touch with us, get in touch with us again. I'd like to have you on the air, because it took a few Canadians to stand up, to speak to power, to get to a point where now we're live streaming across the globe. As I mentioned earlier, people like Shadow Davis up there and other broadcasters are live streaming a lot of this information. It's all about unity. See, well, you got me here, right? What's that? All about unity, right, Alan?
that's right.
Right.
Exactly.
so,
So,
well-
on my Facebook page, you'll also find that I pinned The Hague inquiry to my Facebook page, Alan Nicholson. And if you go there, you could sign the request form. Being a Canadian patriot, you want to request that. It's actually more or less helping us. If you sign, it shows that more people actually want this to happen. So go sign.
Could they go to this? Could they go to this, what we have on, to get that information from you?
You could also send me an email and say, send me the petition form, and I could send it to you. That's not a problem.
That's
Whatever.
it, buddy. Go ahead. I'm
That's
sorry.
it. Already?
Yeah. Well, we're going to give you a lot more time down the road, believe me.
It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, inside joke, folks. Nice talking to you. Alan, any last words before we leave tonight?
Yes, please get involved. If you're a victim, send me an email with your story. Let's include it. Let's get it in there. And let's not discriminate against who is doing evil.
Frankly, I think we've all been victimized. So, and that's why I'm so grateful for people like yourself and others. You're representing a lot of the voiceless people. Good for you.
And it's only fair that we return the favor.
Well, amen to that. Good working with you. I'll be chatting with you.
God bless everyone. And I thank you, Lieutenant, for having me on again.
We'll have you on again, believe me. Thank you. Thanks so much. Take care.
Good night, everyone. God bless.
Now, folks, that's about it. We're going to be back now. Don't forget, Sunday night, okay? Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. here live. I want you to stand by when I go off the air, because I want you to see something regarding Sunday night. Isn't this great, folks? We're talking about things that are so important to people across North America and around the world. We've come together, and I'll always give credit to the Holy Spirit of God. I got to tell you, folks, none of us are able to do this without the guidance of God Almighty, believe me. He has been able to help us with our needs through prayer, through supporters, etc. And I'm sure the other broadcasters that are doing what we're doing, especially in your country. Now, the email is here. I'm going to leave it up there a little longer for those of you who are in the chat room asking for the email. There it is. And if you miss it when we go off the air, just roll the video back. We're going to be posting these shortly so that you'll be able to recapture what we put on here. Folks, thanks a lot. Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. here, a seat at the table. And then next Thursday night, more on This Week in North America. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers. Thank you all, and God bless you for all that you're doing.